Hello and good morning, everyone. Or if you're watching a different time of day, for example, on YouTube, just generally hello and not necessarily good morning, Joe. Could be good evening, good night as well. I will give a couple of minutes for people to settle. I would like to flag that this session is being recorded, and we also have a couple of note takers on there. They might not be just access from these note takers; they may be yours. So there are things taking notes throughout this session as well. We typically use the transcripts of the recording to make sure our closed captions are accurate on the recording. We don't have we don't use PowerPoint's live captioning features with intent. As recording, we don't want them necessarily burned in, but if you do need captions in the session, if you look towards the top right hand side of Microsoft Teams, and if I go right to left here, there should be buttons for left, share, mic, camera, and more. If you click on the three dots for more, head down to language and speech from the overlay, there should be a show live captions option there. So with my Bristolian accent, that West Country twang, if you don't understand what I'm saying, or if I'm indeed speaking too quickly, feel free to turn those on. And as people are joining, let's get everybody comfortable and connected. Whilst we're waiting for people, and I will give a couple of minutes to join. If you're happy to, do feel free to use the chat. Let us know where you're joining from today. That might be location, so where in the world are you joining from? It's always interesting to see who's joining from furthest afield. But also, where you're joining from today could be your role, it could be the company, and if you're comfortable sharing that, feel free to do so. As much as anything else, I like these sessions to be a networking opportunity. So, if you want to share your LinkedIn URL and network with anyone on the session, now is an opportunity to do that. There is no pressure though. As I say, the accessibility networking opportunity is there for those that need it, and I do firmly believe in the power of bringing people together. Just having a look in the chat now. So we got a couple of people joining in from the United States. So hello and welcome. Matthew, you're joining from much closer from home. So Manchester, UK. We've got, forgive me if I mispronounce you here, but Baswati, joining from Edinburgh. We got Danielle from Philadelphia. So nice range of locations. I believe most of you are from English-speaking countries so far, and but whether English is your first language or a learned language, hopefully I will speak at a pace today which will allow you to. London's a middle of a torrential downpour, and Bournemouth, UK. So here, there, and everywhere, which is fantastic. Interesting. If you want to add to this as well, let us know what the weather is where you are. Right now in rugby, we do have a sunny sky, but that could change and probably will change when I do school pickup this afternoon, as it so often does. While people are introducing themselves, I'm going to take a couple of moments just to make sure that everybody can access today. So well done, Jack. I can see you're the first, I think, to pop your LinkedIn there, and it's great to see you. Feel free to do that. So for anyone who has joined much more recently, I've noted already live captions are available here in Microsoft Teams. If you do need those, towards the top right-hand side, we have leave, share, microphone, camera, and more. If you click the three dots for more and head down to language and speech, you should be able to turn on captions there. The recording and the slides will be shared afterwards, so the recordings always get uploaded to YouTube. We add them to a playlist for all the Inclusive Insight session. So if you want to catch up with any previous ones, you can, of course, do that. And make sure we have your email address, because with your email address, we can, of course, send you the slides, the transcripts, and anything else you may need. If you do want to speak today, there will be an opportunity to do so. So please do use that raise hand feature in Microsoft Teams. I think actually is to the left of React, it just says raise. But if you hover over that, it says raise your hand. And a keyboard shortcut for that one is Control Shift and K. I think that assumes a Microsoft machine. But if you want to speak, feel free to do so. For some of you, that may be much easier than kind of commenting in chat, especially if the conversation moves on. If you're not speaking, though, I would ask you to stay muted unless otherwise invited. It just makes for a cleaner transcript. If people are following later on and relying on listening, it means there's no background noise and everything else. Also, if you do want to speak and invited to do so, please do state your name before starting speaking, because if people cannot see you, then it allows them to see that the who's speaking has changed. I'm not expecting you to sound like me, but it just gives people that extra bit of context. Now that everyone knows how to participate, though, let's look at what we're going to cover. So during this session, over the next hour or so, or next 55 minutes, we're going to be looking at why accessibility matters, and we'll start there. Then we'll move into some common barriers that your learners may face in engaging with different content. We'll look at that. We'll move on from there and look at inclusive learning strategies. Then towards future-proofing content. Hopefully, that's not a surprise to you on a session called Future-Proofing Education. So we're looking forward, and we'll end with some practical next steps. Always good to caveat those. So to set expectations and avoid any disappointment, I want to be clear that what this session won't cover is legal advice, technical web content accessibility guideline deep dives, any platform-specific training such as Articulate Rise, Evolve, or other platforms like Blackboard, and every accessibility scenario. We only have 55 minutes. It's not possible to deep dive on every single one of those. It should hopefully give you a high-level understanding of across the board in a number of different ways. With that in mind, then let's start with the kind of the scale of the opportunity. So have I skipped anything? Actually, no, quick pulse check here. Before we go too far then, how confident are you in your organization's accessibility journey? If you are freelance or you're a job seeker at the moment, you can let us know how you feel. A, B, C, or D in this one. So let's get A for I'm just getting started, a B for I'm making some progress, or we as an organization are making some progress. Give us a C or a 3 for some good foundations, and 4 if you think you have a mature program in place. I do want to just note here that regardless of where you are on your journey, if you're an accessibility company and you've been doing this a very long time, you're seasoned professionals with a mature program, fantastic. If you're just getting started, you literally heard the term accessibility yesterday, you wondered what this is about, and I thought, hey, free webinar, let's find out. All of you are welcome. So B to C, so making some progress to setting some good foundations. B nearing to C, so it sounds like we don't necessarily go to a foundation level. Say a couple of C's coming through now, and thank you for engaging. That's showing me that the chat is indeed working. So between C and D as well. So some people further to the right. This helps me as essentially your trainer or your facilitator for today's session, not aim too low. So I can kind of skip over some of those foundational things and hopefully get you some more meat on the bones. Whatever you have answered, whether using a pen and paper or your favorite note-taking app, or indeed if you've commented in the chat, you're exactly who this session was designed for. What I would say is accessibility is not a niche issue. 1 in 4 UK adults are disabled or have some kind of disability. The World Health Organization predicts that something I think is between 18 and 25% of the population are disabled, and in many cases, this number might actually be underreported through just lack of awareness that you have a disability, such as a neurodivergence. Maybe you're waiting for a diagnosis. So these stats may be underreported and could be potentially higher as well. In any case, though, millions of learners experience barriers every single day, and accessibility helps everyone. And if you're a decision maker in an organization, I'm not sure whether this is right for you, or is this just helping people with disabilities? And I say that with quotations, because just like there's billions of us who this can help. But ultimately, as we move to a world with generative AI tools like ChatGPT, Claude, and many others, these same accessibility features, the alt text, the transcripts, all of these things help you and your content get picked up by these generative AI tools. So if you're seeking to build authority through blogging and things like that, your content is more likely to be picked up and you're more likely to be referenced if indeed you are making your content accessible. Essentially, Google's bots and all the other search engine bots are deafblind. They can't see your content, they can't hear it. So if you don't provide alternatives, is skipping over potentially a large audience. But anyway, we're not here to talk about bots today. We're talking about real people, real learners. And I think it's worth highlighting that learners are more diverse than we realise. So, just on the neurodiversity examples, I believe 10% of the population might experience dyslexia. Um, Obviously, there's conditions such as ADHD and autism. I happen to have both of those. I don't have dyslexia, but I have both autism, ADHD, Tourette's, and more. There are vision impairments, hearing impairments, mobility impairments, and mental health conditions as well. Can be controversial as to whether we consider mental health an accessibility feature or not. But I think severe depression, severe anxiety, when kind of severe enough, can actually be considered a disability under the UK Equality Act, for example, and reasonable adjustments do indeed need to be made. I've lost my cursor, do bear with me. So, just looking at the scale of the problem, I mentioned that 10% of the population have dyslexia. That's an approximate figure. Also, roughly 1 in 12 men are colorblind, and 1 in 200 women are colorblind. And if you consider various stages of your organization, maybe you're a salesperson, or maybe you're kind of working with different organizations. If you take into consideration, unfortunately, most leadership, or most people in leadership are men. A lot of these disabilities, if you take 1 in 12 men are colorblind, um, you're likely to have somebody who is colorblind and neurodivergent or neurodivergent on the board. I say and as a potentially thing as well, because these disabilities don't live in isolation. You can have colorblindness and autism and ADHD or anything else. Obviously, it's not exclusive to men, so women can have this too. And as we increase diversity in the workplace, certainly things like menopause, for example, in women can actually heighten things like ADHD and autism symptoms. So your symptoms aren't kind of as they were as a child, as they were in your teenage years throughout life. Symptoms can change as we navigate through life as well. And as we get older, um, certainly here in the UK, but I'm aware abroad as well, as we get older, our governments keep on increasing the retirement age. We're more likely to be still working with as we get older into our 60s, maybe even our 70s. And as we get older, we're likely to have reduced vision, and we're going to need glasses. Our hearing might start to go, and those injuries, those aches and pains, or arthritis from your childhood and everything else, they start to get worse. So, and we're only ever temporarily not disabled. And if you look at the kind of UK protected characteristics under the UK Equality Act of 2010, disability is the only one of those clubs you can technically join at any time. Um, when many people hear the word accessibility, they kind of think about the permanent disabilities. So, blindness, people, and when they think blindness, they think people who see black, and that's kind of a common misnomer. It's so many of these things, whether it's autism, blindness, deafness, all of these things are on a spectrum. Even color blindness. No two people with color blindness may see exactly the same. So when we run simulations and stuff like that, we can do our best to simulate how it may look to some people. We're often simulating barriers rather than the disability as well. Um, what I would say is accessibility benefits a much wider group of people. And some of these examples you see on screen are from Microsoft's inclusive design model, which describes 3 broad categories. So number 1 is permanent. These are long-term conditions such as blindness, deafness, autism, cerebral palsy, Parkinson's disease, or limb loss or limb difference. These could be things you are born with, and that can happen later in life. You may get something poked through an eye and lose an eye. You unfortunate circumstances regarding kind of wars and everything else. Things can happen where you may have a limb difference or more of one of these at a short notice. It might also be temporary, so short-term conditions such as a broken arm. You could literally walk out your door after this session, fall over and break your arm, and you'll experience a temporary disability. With any luck, that's going to get better. You could be recovering from a surgery. So when I had my tooth out, my wisdom tooth out the other year, I could hardly speak, and I relied on text chat and other forms of communication. Could be a concussion, again, something else I've experienced, severe illness or migraine. Under severe illness, if we think just roll the clock back 5, maybe even 6 years ago now with COVID, many people might have experienced the COVID-19 or had COVID. And even now, if you've largely recovered, you might experience things that you didn't before, such as fatigue, or brain fog. There are things that you could get anytime that stay with us. Finally, there are situational. So these are challenges created by the environment. So trying to read your screen in bright sunlight, maybe on the beach, if you've been blessed with those like 5 days of nice weather we've had in the half term. Listening to audio in a noisy environment. So trying to take a call at a conference, for example, where you don't have live captions. Carrying a child, if you're a new parent, especially if you're carrying a child and the shopping, you don't have either arm available. And it could be kind of wearing protective gloves. So you might be a gardener and a call happens, and all of a sudden you can't do the touch screen, and your touch is somewhat limited. So the important thing here is that anyone can experience barriers. So a video without captions creates difficulties for somebody who is deaf. Can also create difficulties for somebody in a noisy train station. A website with tiny text or your e-learning with tiny text can affect somebody with a visual impairment, yes, but can also affect somebody trying to read on a mobile phone in bright sunlight. So if you've got poor contrast and the sun is shining on it, simple things like increasing the size of your text and using a higher contrast. So it might be dark text on a light background, or indeed light text on a dark background, can go a long way to helping a number of people. Key takeaway on this one, though, is that when we design for accessibility, we normally improve the experience for everyone. Think the electric toothbrush, which is originally a to help people with limited mobility, or the dropped curb, originally designed to help people in wheelchair. But if you imagine you're coming out of Heathrow or your local airport with really heavy suitcase, you don't want that thing slamming off the curb and potentially breaking the wheels, because you're going to have a difficult time thereafter. You might be a delivery person, taking things on a trolley. Things that are often designed for people with disabilities in mind can go a long way to benefiting everyone, not just a small minority. And ultimately, this then comes down to where some people might challenge me of sometimes I might move away from accessibility towards universal design, but it's recognizing that human needs change depending on our health, depending on the circumstances and our environment. And often designing for those edge cases improves the experience in the middle. So if you imagine I was doing a branching scenario for somebody who is deafblind, I have a basic input device so people can choose A, B, C, or D. I've got an AI-powered backend which can drive the scenario in all kinds of ways. And it works in text-based. There's nothing to say, it only has to be text-based. You can still have images, you can still go down a video route, but if you can make it work for somebody who's deafblind, you can make it work, pick up by search engines, and you can add to that. But if you start with accessibility as the default, you can often add things, interactions to other people without compromising the experience. So accessibility and accessible experience isn't a lesser experience, and we will cover more of that in due course. I'm slightly behind time, so I'm going to pick up a little bit. And if you do need me to slow down at any stage, please do just let me know in the chat. That you can put slow down or anything to that effect, and I will keep an eye on it. So we've looked at who accessibility supports, and because we as we've noticed, many sees these and everything else, we're going to make this a little more practical now. So these aren't rare edge cases. They appear in learning platforms. They appear in PDFs. And anyone who knows about accessibility probably knows about some of the challenges with PDF accessibility. They might also appear in webinars, especially if the trainer has a thick accent, speaks particularly fast, and there's a lot of interaction. Hey, just comment in chat, and people spend a long time writing their comment, and then the conversation moves on. And so we might start creating situations where people aren't being heard because of they've got great things to say, but the pace is going a little bit too quickly. It might show up in our assessments, our classrooms, our portals, and our safe pace modules. And if any of this resonates with you as designers, the goal here is not to blame, and I want to make that clear. The goal is to help us notice barriers earlier. So let's start with some of the most common barriers in which are kind of slides in e-learning. Tiny text is a very, very common one. So tiny text affects more people than we think, and tiny text can affect people with low vision. It can affect people who are joining on a phone today. So even if I had taken real care to make sure I adhere to kind of recommended minimums on font size, and it looks great on my screen or my monitor. If somebody's joining from a smaller smartphone, that text is going to be significantly smaller. Um, it can affect people on a bright room, especially if you're in a bright room on your phone or you're watching this on the train and there's glare. It could also affect tired learners at the end of a very long day. So a simple design rule helps this one. Try and use fewer words, use larger text, and use more slides if you need to. I know that might be contrary to those of us in learning design. Ultimately, if we use larger text, that kind of forces our hand to not have these kind of long blocks of text on the slide. Try and pair your text with icons to help people with dyslexia or non-native speakers follow along. And rather than having lots of slides each covering multiple points, have more slides with each slide covering just one point. And we'll try and role model this as we go through. So text is one barrier, audio is another. Captions support learners who are deaf and hard of hearing, but they also support learners in noisy places. They help people who process written language more easily than spoken language, and they help people learning in a second language. So with this one, it's important that your captions are checked, not just relying on the auto closed captioning. So for example, when I upload the video and the transcripts to YouTube following the sessions, I will do manual checks on the captions to make sure they're accurate. Because I care about the user experience, and if people are watching this and it is full of incorrect mistakes, what message would that be sending to a potential consumer who may have been considering us? Auto captions are useful, but they do still need review. So captions can help with audio, and color can help with meaning, but only when we use it carefully. So I mentioned color just now. Color is indeed a useful one, and that's certainly where a lot of my experience with or early experience with other people with disabilities comes from. My best friend was colorblind at school. My father-in-law was colorblind. Best friend being red-green colorblind. My father-in-law being blue-green, and it's interesting to see some of those. What I would say is color alone can exclude people. So that can include people with color vision deficiency, such as different color blindness. Um, it also affects people printing in black and white. So when we're in education or university, a lot of the time it might be it costs like 2 to 3 pence per page in black and white, probably 12 pence to print in color. So um, then we're potentially showing prejudice against low-income families or people who might be less affluent, if they're forced to print in black and white. Also affects people with low-quality screens. And ultimately, there are a number of quick wins you can do here as well. So not relying on red and green alone. So, that green check or that red cross, make sure you're pairing it with that check icon or the cross icon to say, yes, that's right. No, that's not right. Use patterns if you can, use icons and use direct text where possible. This is especially important for things like charts and dashboards. Infographics is another one that comes to mind when it comes to kind of learning of things, and assessment feedback and status indicators. So yes, we can move on. No, we can't, or something needs doing. I appreciate I'm going at pace now, but just to move on, let's move now from what learners can see to what learners can operate. So if we've covered what they can see, what they can access, that's the P in poor, perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust, a common acronym in the WCAG guidelines, just to understandable. So operable, sorry. So the O. That a keyboard trap happens when somebody moves onto a part of the page and activity, but they can't move away or move on to the next thing using a keyboard. I see Jack on the line recently who joined us for allyship or online escape room, and Jack would have experienced a simulation of this. It's one of those examples which is very easy to simulate for somebody who doesn't understand. Keyboard accessibility matters for people who don't necessarily who do not use a mouse, and that might be the kind of the battery in the mouse has died. They might have a limb difference. There could be a number of reasons why they might not use a mouse. It also matters for learners using assistive technologies, and these things can show up in quizzes. It can happen in pop-ups, and it can happen in interactive learning as well. On pop-ups, say for example, you are designing a website or a learning feature, and you've used one of those pop-up tools which go, "Hi, I see you've landed on my page. Can I help?" You might have checked all the accessibility on your website and checked for the tab order, correct heading structures as well. Quite often, though, those little pop-ups that appear, they take the keyboard focus, and which means if you try and close that now, um, all of that content, all that useful information that was on your page might have been skipped over entirely by a plugin that might have been skipped over when you're doing these kind of page by page tests. A simple test can help you with this one. So if you set your mouse aside, turn that off. If you use and then try navigating your website or your e-learning using things like tab to kind of skip to headings or to find links. Shift if you want to kind of necessarily go backwards, so shift tab to go the other way, and enter keys to kind of make a selection. See if you can complete the journey. So see if you can complete the sign up process, one of your modules, or the checkout process. Sometimes the problem isn't necessarily being trapped, it's that the problem is being kind of forced to move too quickly. In some assessments, timing might be necessary. So if you imagine, I'm looking to be a surgeon or a bomb technician and I need to do things quickly, timing can be important in those situations. But if timing is there for the sake of timing only, to kind of maybe gamification or time pressure, you should really be asking kind of three or four questions. What are we really measuring? If this is kind of cabin crew work or something else, and people are asking for extra time on the assessment, and you're thinking about denying it, why? What are we really measuring if somebody needs an extra 2 minutes or so to complete an assessment? Are we measuring knowledge? Are we measuring skill? Or are we simply measuring speed under pressure? If you're measuring speed under pressure, then yes, you might consider timers. But if you're testing knowledge and skill, it's probably less relevant. So try and give people control where possible. Allow them to pause the exercise or pause the experience. Much easier to in video content, but certainly in any carousels or things that might move. Try and allow people to extend the timelines if they need it. A common feature you might see in video games. Allow people to save their progress. So if they're feeling fatigued and they need to shut down now, allow them to pick up where they left off, and try and offer untimed practice periods if you can. So before you take the assessment in that time scenario, allow people to work through examples of the assessment without that time practice, so they can kind of get an idea of, okay, these are the formats of the questions. These are the kinds of questions that might be asked. Another common barrier then is kind of movement or media that people can't control. So I've already touched on control earlier, but also playing media can create sensory overload quite significantly. It can interrupt screen reader users. It can distract learners with attention differences. It can create anxiety for people who need predictability, and can also be a problem in quiet workplaces or shared learning experiences. So again, giving people control to let them start the media, to let them pause the media, to let them mute, and to let them slow down can make a huge difference. Another barrier then is a format that might look simple but can create hidden barriers, and that's PDFs. So PDFs are common in schools, colleges, universities, and even workplace learning, especially as kind of the accessible alternative. But many PDFs can be hard to use. They might have no heading structure. The reading order might be wrong, especially if they've been created in tools like PowerPoint or kind of Illustrator. The amount of times I've sent a accessible document to a designer, for example, and got something back in completely the wrong order. The reading order gets completely broken. I'd be a wealthy man if I had £1 or $1 for every time one of those. Your links might be unclear. Tables might not make sense. Images might have no text alternative if you haven't done it already, or potentially, those this alt text was created by AI. If there's loads of those in your document, it just shows you haven't taken the care to actually check some of that. Scanned PDFs are another big one. Scanned PDFs are often just pictures of text and totally unreadable to a screen reader. And ultimately, if a learner can't navigate it, search it, resize it, or listen to it, the content isn't working for them. So documents are one part of the journey. Navigation is a different one. And between these kind of first 7 barriers and this one, You might have noticed I changed up the visuals a little bit. Imagine you'd gotten used to the visual structure, you know, of this is what the headings look like and everything else, and all of a sudden something changes. You know, unclear navigation creates cognitive load. And that means the learner spends more energy finding the content rather than learning from it. So in addition to the web content accessibility guidelines, we need to consider things like COGA, the cognitive accessibility guidelines. And this matters in LMSs, learning management systems. It matters in portals, course menus, long modules. And when you get it right, good navigation as a checklist, tell people where am I, or what have I done so far, what comes next, how do I go back, and how do I get help? So if I am stuck, how can I get help to solve the problem? Navigation is about finding the path then, and then language is about understanding it. So the U in understand in poor as well. Complex language can also exclude people. So complex language can exclude people with dyslexia, with cognitive disabilities, learners under stress, learners who kind of speak English as an additional language, and learners who are tired. So plain language doesn't necessarily mean childish language. It means clear language. So familiar words, more shorter sentences rather than fewer longer sentences connected by a comma. Clear headings, giving examples of something, and giving a definition of where needed. So when I've referenced WCAG, I've gone into Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, COGA, Cognitive Accessibility Guidelines. If these are the first time people are experiencing these acronyms, it can make a big difference to have them defined. Finally, then, languages. Language matters, but so do the images that we use. So images can support learning, but only if people can access the learning. So decorative images can usually be marked as decorative, either by a checkbox or using double quotations. Informative images need careful alternative text. Complex diagrams such as infographics and things like that might need a longer description. Charts may also need a data table, so some people may struggle with charts and prefer the numbers instead. And screenshots might need key information written out in a different way. So a good question on your images is, what would somebody miss if they couldn't see the image? Okay, so at this stage, we've kind of looked at 10 barriers, and I'm going to look at the chat in a moment. Let's kind of just pause and make this practical. So once again, in chat, if you can type one letter, in which barrier appears most often in your world? Is it A, text, B, captions, C, color, D, navigation, E, PDFs, or F, language? You notice with the interactions in these, I am asking you to comment in chat, yes, but I'm not asking you to write out sentences. I'm not asking you to write out words. I'm trying to make this as easy as possible, just to write one letter and enter. Hopefully that speeds up the petition for anyone. So captions is one, navigation I can see coming through, and I'm just looking at the chat as well. So Olivia asks, how do we see learning becoming more inclusive going forward? Nina, thank you for responding to that one. More diversity inputs, processing and expressing knowledge, more possibility for project-based, coursework-based assessment, and less emphasis on exams. I think that's a fantastic one to allow people to do things in their own time, or in their own way is another great one. More understanding of diverse adjustments needed in exams, such as placement in a quiet room. More accessibility in testing the platforms by expert users of screen reader and keyboard shortcuts. So anytime we're doing testing, I always advocate for testing with people with real disabilities, real experiences, not just these automated tools. Carice, I can see you've commented as well. More comments, more conversations, and a lot of trial and error. So these are things that most learning designers will be aware of learning also comes with, I find this difficult because. So make sure when you're asking for feedback that your feedback form is accessible, is a huge one. And don't just capture the data, make sure you're doing stuff with it. Looking at the chat once more, so one, I can see text, E and D, PDFs and language, A and D, so text and PDFs, all of them. Kingman has also commented, there are many points which could be picked up on. So if we were to choose one, accessibility needs to be a culture that's adopted throughout the organization. So not just the job of developers and learning designers, but the whole organization and the willingness to learn. So to name a couple of benefits, it'd be easier for us to make changes or have sufficient time to ensure we're all able to apply and check accessibility. Couldn't agree more. If accessibility rests on the shoulders of specific individuals, what happens when those individuals leave the organization? A number of these things. So moving on then, what I would say is accessibility starts before the launch of your content. And this is kind of the center of the session. So accessibility isn't something we should bolt on at the end. It should be part of the design process. And when I've worked with large organizations, we've looked, especially those in learning design, we look at the ADDIE model and try and focus on shift left, looking at accessibility at every stage of the process. Accessibility really should be a part of the design process. And that's ultimately what shift left means. It is moving accessibility earlier. So rather than release, let's make sure we're testing it before that. And if you can check accessibility before you've written a single line of code, or before you've even interacted with Articulate Rise or Storyline, it's going to make a big difference. So merge it into your planning, merge it into procurement, storyboarding, templates, testing, and governance. Check accessibility at every stage. Any of you who are already familiar with Accessible.me's own materials, they will have described an accessible path approach as designing for all users and world conditions from the start rather than kind of adding it on later. And Sarah Mercier's Build Capable platform, which won an award at Learning Technologies, was designed with accessibility in mind from the start. So they didn't go, let's check that we adhere to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. No, they started with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and people comment on the platform to say how easy it is to use. So we kind of looked at why. Now let's make the shift a bit more relatable. So these questions are simple, but they do change the work. So instead of asking, is this compliant at the end, those working through the checklists, these are better questions to think about from the start. Who is this for? Who might struggle? And with that question, who might struggle? If you don't know anybody with disabilities, look at the accessibility or disability personas. If you Google accessibility personas or disability personas, you'll find the UK government ones, for example, here in the UK. And if you're interested, Accessible.me have some of our own which go beyond that. What needs control? What needs all alternatives? So if you can't find a way to make it accessible, you will need an alternative. Yes, great time to find that out is at the start. And then what do we need to test? If you do this in mind, it reduces rework, improves the learner experience, and it lowers risk. So these questions fit into kind of a simple learning design cycle as you work your way along, and every time you update it. Accessibility, though, isn't one task. It's a habit built into learning cycles. So at the planning stage, defining the learner needs, just as you would kind of with any other aspect, checking for disabilities and considerations. At the design stage, choosing accessible formats. At the build phase, using accessible templates. You can save a lot of time if you use templates with so much of this done already. At the test phase, you need to be including assistive technology and real-world users where possible. So yes, it's good to practice with screen readers like NVDIA, but don't, just because you've checked it, it doesn't necessarily mean you've picked up on the nuances that somebody who uses this every single day will have picked up on. And at the improve stage, as you complete the cycle, act on that feedback. So if we want inclusive learning outcomes, we need inclusive learning evidence. So with that, let's turn our principles now into something that all of you listening today can apply almost immediately. Principle number 1 is cognitive load. So cognitive load essentially means the mental effort needed to use something. Poor design increases that effort, and clear design reduces it. Our cognitive accessibility profiles highlight barriers such as memory load. If you're asking people to remember something that they did earlier in the day or earlier in the module, attention span, sequencing, so the order in which things appears, ease of reading, processing speed, sensory overwhelm, navigation, and error handling. If people make a mistake, how do we help them? And this is why we use short sections. It's why we generally speaking, promote consistent layouts, plain language, predictable navigation, so you know where to find the help button, you know where that next button is always going to be, and good examples. So not just shaming the companies that get this wrong, but going, hey, this is what good looks like. That's often something that much more useful because people can replicate that. They don't feel told off. Um, Reducing the cognitive load is one aspect, kind of keeping control is another. So control um, will come up a few times in the barriers. Giving people control is giving them access. So a learner might need to pause because of the doorbell going, for example. They might need to pause because they're feeling overwhelmed or stressed, or maybe they've got a headache because they've been at the screen too long. People might need to replay a section. So very difficult to say if you left the webinar and you have no access to the replay. If you, especially if you wanted to kind of revisit a specific sections, and you can replay specific sections as well if you chunk up your learning, which is where I think micro learning is particularly helpful. People might need captions, and they might not. So having captions on default can help a lot of people. But if you have dyslexia, for example, or ADHD, captions on when you don't need them can actually be a distraction. They might need an alternate activity, especially if there's drag and drop and other exercises which aren't keyboard accessible, and they might need to come back to later. So ultimately, control reduces stress. Control supports autonomy, and autonomy is great for learning, and it helps people participate without having to explain themselves. So you don't have to go to a teacher or get in touch with the company to say, "Oh, I need a Braille alternative or anything else." If you can just say, hey, here's the accessibility menu, and include that in your tutorial. If you want to customize the settings, you can absolutely do that. Choice is important when we design learning formats, is to try and do it as much as possible. Related to choice then, not every learner needs the same route. Some learners will prefer video, some people will prefer text, some might need transcripts, some will need audio, some need practice, and some need quiet reflection. With any one of those examples, I could swap out the word need for prefer. So some people might prefer to read a transcript rather than me speaking at this pace because I'm speaking too slow. I might be speaking too fast for other people who might prefer to read for those same reasons. Also, if I have a difficulty in reading, I might prefer to watch the video. If I have a speech impediment, I might not want to raise my hand and come off mute. I might prefer to write in chat. So give people choice. The learning outcome can stay the same. We're still trying to teach them the same thing, trying to get them to do the different thing, but the route to get there can vary. So this is especially useful in schools, colleges, and universities, also apprenticeships and workplace learning. So more routes don't actually help you if the content itself isn't structured. So linking to point 4 then, structure is something that helps everybody. Structures help screen readers navigate, so clear headings, the screen reader will use those as navigation elements. It can help learners scan, so if you use a heading 1 as one of the main features, and every heading 2, if it's styled the same and everything else, belongs to that same heading 1 topic. It allows you to kind of skim the content. It allows people to return to key points. So all that point I was coming to earlier was really helpful. Let me reread that. If it's under a heading, I can find that nice and easily. It helps people who need breaks find where they were, and it helps people using mobile devices. So good structure includes things like headings, meaningful links, and by meaningful links I mean not click here and everything else, but it might describe the action. Sign up now, add to cart. All those things are meaningful links because they tell users what's going to happen. Clear summaries is another one. So structure then supports content. Feedback now is what supports supports confidence. So I think if you're following along and able to stick with me so far, feedback, you're starting to see, okay, we're looking at every stage of the cycle now. So feedback is near the end of that cycle, and feedback can support learning, and it can create shame. So just if people get answers wrong, incorrect, it's rarely enough, and nobody wants to see loads of red ink all over their homework. Useful feedback then explains the issue. It offers the next step, so what you need to do to kind of to go back and learn more, or what they need to do. It reduces fear because they're not thinking, okay, what happens now that I failed? It kind of it takes that away, and this matters in things like quizzes, assignments, simulations, onboarding, and compliance learning. If you go beyond accessible design towards trauma-informed approaches, this also avoids humiliating people for getting something wrong, which might trigger RSD, which is rejection sensitivity dysphoria. It can help them recover and continue, and just stay on track, do not get demotivated, not want to leave or get fed up. So again, once more, I'm going to pause at this stage and just ask you for one more letter. If you prefer to speak, you can absolutely do that. And I invite you once again to raise your hand. If you raise your hand, I will give you the option to unmute. But otherwise, just pop a letter into chat, and I'm going to keep this one short. So, which of these would you fix first? Is it A, are you going to try and reduce cognitive load? Google COGA or Cognitive Accessibility Guidelines to help that. Are you going to give learner control? Are you going to offer more routes to complete? Are you going to try and improve the structure of your content? So if you didn't know, for example, in Microsoft Word, that it has the heading structures built in, that's a good place to start, or to improve feedback. Once again, I can see comments. So all C, take action with the data and okay, yeah, unitize it. E, so improving feedback. A variety of approaches here, and I'm just going to come up to Kingman's comment as well. So there are many points that can be picked upon. So to choose one, accessibility needs. I think I've covered this one regarding the culture, so I won't necessarily repeat that now, just for the interest of time. So yes, C, multimodal, which is fantastic. A good example for anyone who has children here is if you download the Happy Meal app on your phone. The first time I was blown away, the first time I loaded the McDonald's Happy Meal app, I was presented with a screen which customized the option. Do I want large text? Do I want it to read aloud? Do I want high contrast mode? It's a fantastic example which you can go, and if you don't want to keep it on your phone, delete it after. That's fine. But if you want an example of who does this right, that's a great one to get started on. All of these answers, though, are exactly why self-paced learning can be useful when it's designed well. So self-paced learning, which essentially for most people is online learning or stuff they can access is not automatically accessible. When it's designed well, it can help. So it can let people pause. It can help them repeat the module, reflect on the module, and return. If you use captions or transcripts, if you move at a pace that works for them, so not timed interactions or activities that time out, these are all reasons why self-paced learning can be a part of an inclusive pathway. They're not the whole answer, but they are useful there. And the Accessible Me backbone, or which used to be the Accessible Me Academy, if you've worked with us for a while now, is one way that can help you build that layer. So I'll keep this brief. The Accessible Me Academy or the Accessible Me backbone is something that helps teams with their confidence. It helps them need practical examples. Thank you, Matt, for joining the session. I will share the video with you after if I have your email address. So do catch up if you can. But we also provide kind of practical examples of how you do this in the real world. They build repeatable habits, and ultimately, as I noted, self-paced learning can help people revisit the content after live sessions. It can also support people who are not able to attend the live training, such as this today. But it normally works best when it's blended with other support. And what I would say is the most effective pathways our learning pathways are the ones that are blended. So self-paced content that builds the foundations. So you can kind of, rather than in a live session, me trying to cover all of the WCAG criteria, you could do that self-paced. That then means when you join a live session, we can do a Q&A. What did you get stuck on? What didn't you understand? And we can have discussions around it. Maybe we can practice. So all these things, virtual instructor-led training can create the dialogue, helping that peer-to-peer learning, and especially if you've got a great teacher. In-person sessions create a great shared experience. So if you experience allyship in person, which is accessibility themed escape rooms. That in-person dynamic makes a big difference. And ultimately, practice turns the awareness into skill. So that's where experiential learning is fantastic. If you can allow people to learn but immediately apply, or learning on the job, this is where it really makes a difference. So again, this all aligns with Accessible Me's broader offer around webinars, around audits, and I'm joined by Danielle from Accessibility Shield today, our partner who do the Armour platform. There's training and workshops and strategy support. Learning also becomes stronger when people experience the barriers, not just learn about them. So I did note just now the allyship. So awareness is useful. There's lots online that talks around awareness and things like that. A lot of my blogs are all around awareness. But experience can create a stronger shift. And allyship, what we do with that, we use gamified learning. So some of you might be familiar with empathy labs. Allyship is essentially a gamified empathy lab to help teams explore barriers around vision, around hearing, around mobility and dexterity in a safe and simulated environment. The point of that isn't to pretend we know exactly what somebody else experiences. It's to create empathy, reflection, and practical action. So at the end of each cycle, we reflect on, okay, how could we make the learning more accessible? How could we make our events more accessible? How could we make the inclusive more accessible to our colleagues? Allyship, along with a light touch audit, some strategy consulting. These are all part of our Kickstarter campaign. So if you're interested with that, do follow up. Accessibility is not only about kind of one module or a slide deck, though, it's about the full journey end to end. So ultimately, if you're kind of a learning designer or you're from academia, before the session, you want to ask can people register? Can they request adjustments? And can they understand what to expect? During the session, then, can they participate? And if you've asked those, can they request adjustments in advance? That's going to help you rather not get caught off guard. Can they access the captions? And can they take breaks if they need to? And finally, after the session, can they revisit the recording? Can they access the slides? Which means they don't have to write everything down and get a sore wrist. And ultimately, now let's just break this into a pathway of practical design. So a lot of access is won or lost before the learning design begins. So it happens when you tell people what will happen. If you tell them how to access captions, as I did a couple of times at the start of the session, if you let people know whether or not this is recorded. So if they are tight for time today, maybe they've got a crying baby in the background, maybe they didn't sleep well, maybe they got a potato day, which is the opposite of a hyper-focused day. If you let them know they're recorded, you give them that permission to catch up. Try and give people a route for access needs. Avoid forcing disclosure in public. Nobody wants to say, "Hey, I need help," and shine that spotlight on them. But make it normal for people to ask for support. Ask the question and create that psychological safety. Then during the session, design for participation. So not everyone can or wants to participate in the same way. Some people would like to speak. Some people prefer to kind of comment in chat. Some people will need time to process, and some people will watch things later. They might struggle in a classroom environment and prefer to do something in their own time. Interactive doesn't necessarily mean putting people on the spot. So it's not about going, Danielle, what did you think of everything I covered in the webinar? And go, oh, I don't know. I'm sorry to pick on you. I can see you smiling now. You just happen to be who I see on the screen. It can be around kind of using simple chat prompts. As I have them throughout the session, comment A, B, or C, 1, 2, or 3. Raise your hand if you wish to speak. I'm not picking on people and saying, hey, what do you think? But I am inviting discussion. And this keeps participation accessible. After learning then on the follow-ups matters. So people will forget. And I always find it ironic at the conferences and stuff I attend where they have multiple sessions throughout a day. They go, right, fantastic. I hope you all enjoyed my session. And then you leave and you've got about 5 minutes to 15 minutes before the next section. So you have no time to reflect. You have no time to reply. or apply the learning. Um, and much of that is going to forget because our brains, yes, they are like sponges, but if you try and soak up more water when your sponge is already full, things are going to slip the cracks, which is why self-paced matters. People need time, and they might want to revisit the content with their colleagues, um, which is why recordings, synchronized captions, slides, and checklists, they all help with learning transfer. Um, they also give you a natural follow-up route after your webinars, after your content, and it matters commercially too. So um, if you need kind of clearer post-event nurture, if you need stronger call to actions on kind of just do one thing today. What one thing are you going to do differently after this session? You know, these all lead to better next steps. I had to turn this into a kind of a pathway for you. Um, Awareness alone isn't enough. It is still important, yes, but the problem happens when awareness has no next step. So a useful pathway might be, and if you attended our Global Accessibility Awareness Days, this should look familiar for you now. Number one is notice the barrier. Number two is to prioritize what matters most. So what are the low-hanging fruit? What are the quick wins? Or is this a critical thing that a lot of people are experiencing? Number three, fix what you can. And number four, embed better habits for next time. This is kind of progress over perfection in action. And to make that even simpler, to give you a practical route, just to reappear. One, notice the barrier. So if somebody has complained, are you looking at your feedback? Figure out what that is. Number two, choose the priority. How are you going to rank it? Is it the thing that comes up most often? Is it the easiest to fix? Is it, I know this person's coming up on the next course and this is mandatory training? A great place to start might be the mandatory training that's coming up next. And if it's mandatory training that happens every year and doesn't happen for another 340 days, probably doesn't need to be the number one thing you need to fix. Fix what's coming up first and foremost. Number three, choose one next step. So think about what that is, and then check whether, when it comes to refining that and go through the loop again, check whether it helped. So you can let people know, and that can become your marketing as well. Hey, you fed back this. We heard you. You're making people feel validated now. We fixed it, so you're making them feel not just validated but valued. And now you're checking whether it helped. It gives an opportunity to come back. Maybe you didn't cater to my needs before, but maybe you have done this time. This all helps avoid overwhelm. It avoids the trap of trying to fix everything at once. And ultimately, the key is movement. You know, you want to see kind of, if you were to benchmark, where are you today? And look at a year from now, a month from now, what you want to see is movement. There is no excuse once you're aware of for inaction. Small repeated actions beats the kind of occasional panic. Oh no, Title Two is here. Oh no, the European Accessibility Act is here. Do you know, like if you can be proactive and make small iterations, you're going to help yourself. And just to connect those kind of habits to services and supports, should you need them. Some teams might know where they are now. I asked you at the start of the session where you think you are, and many of you know where you stand, and that's fantastic. Some of you are between areas, and that's fine. Some of you know you need to get the content fixed, and if you're not sure where to get started, we can help you with that. Some of you may need training, so you might know and you might care about accessibility, but your team might not, especially if you're a middle manager, so you can get them trained and up to scratch as well. And some of you might need a longer term pathway. So you might need to convince the leadership that, hey, we need some money to spend on this. And you might need a strategy session. Accessible Me does support all four. So you can get an audit with us on your learning content, your website, or your app through Accessibility Shield. We can help you with remediation. We can help you fix the things we identify. We can help you with training. And yes, that does cover experiential learning as well, not just self-paced stuff. And we can help you with strategy sessions. So the question isn't, are we perfect? The question is kind of what feels the right next step now based on where we are. So what I would say though is if you weren't sure, you don't need to know the answer today. You just need a next step. So an audit can help you understand your current state. This is your benchmark. This is where you are now. Training can help your team build capability so that in future you pass that audit first time. You don't need to kind of keep going around that loop. Remediation helps you get there quickly. So It helps you fix that content should you need to get there quickly. And if you need to kind of create energy, empathy, or momentum regarding your initiatives, that's where experiential stuff like allyship really does come into its own. And our Kickstarter offer is built around those low risk entry points. You can choose a webinar, you can choose an audit, you can choose the escape room, or even a strategy session if you feel that will help you and help your organization. So I'll try and make this easy. You don't need one message. If you do want help, if you're still with us, and you want help working out where the next step is, please just pop a me in the chat. If you've registered through Eventbrite, we should have your email address and number. If not, if you go onto our website and find the contact us, you can drop us a line there, and we will follow up with you after the session. There is no pressure. I'm not here to hard sell you. I'm not here to shame. I'm just trying to give those of you who need it a practical starting point. Ultimately, before we go to questions now, because I appreciate we are at time, I just want to leave you with one final idea. And that's, yes, I know accessibility can feel overwhelming, and that's why many teams stall. They kind of see accessibility as this huge Trojan horse heading towards our organization, whereas we could all be Trojan mice. We can all do our own little bit in our organization, even if you don't have leadership, sponsorship, or buy-in yet. So the goal isn't about instant perfection. It's about honest progress. It's about find one barrier, fix it, learn from it. So have that debrief with the team and build that into your next design, so you don't repeat the mistake in the future. Build it into your templates to help your teammates avoid it as well. And over time, then accessibility can become part of your organization's DNA, much like it is with ours. I personally don't have a hard stop, so I would like to invite questions at this stage. If you are leaving us now and you do have questions, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. You connect with Danielle or Olivia in our marketing team. You can connect with your peers, those who put their LinkedIn URLs in the chat earlier in the session. Try and have those conversations. Ultimately, if, as I noted, if at this stage you want to come off mute, you can absolutely do so. And if I load controls, I've turned on now the ability to unmute yourself if you want to. Steffi, you said you had to go. Thank you for the session. I'm glad it's helped. But as there are no questions at the moment, I'd just kind of throw things out to you. And I'll start with 3 questions. Number 1 is, which of the barriers that we've covered today, or more broadly speaking, do you see most often? The second one is, which of these things feels hardest for you to fix? Whether that's a monetary issue, whether that's a time issue. If you need help, we can support you with that. And third and finally, what will help your team move forward? Is it training? Is it an audit? Progress over perfection? All we want you to do at this stage is to not stay still, to just make some progress in the right direction, because it really will make a difference, not just to your learners, but to your profits. Accessible content is content that SEO can pick up, search engine optimization, that Geo, these chatbots can pick up. So it's worth doing, even if I've not convinced you that it's the right thing to do for people with disabilities. Thank you to everyone who is leaving. So thank you, Laura, thank you, Jack, and thank you, Aswati, and thank you, Caris. Really hope you've enjoyed it. What I would say is, if you have enjoyed the session, if you have a colleague who you might think, hey, they should watch this, the recording will be uploaded to YouTube shortly. We will be adding captions and checking the captions, and we can, of course, share the slides. So if you want the slides, feel free to kind of get in touch and request them. Otherwise, they will be sent out as part of the email. But once more, if you have typed me up at some point in the session, we will follow up with you. If you haven't, that's fine as well. You're still very welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn, to connect with my colleagues, and to connect with your peers. And the next step isn't to do everything, it's to choose one meaningful improvement. So thank you, everyone who is still here. Thank you, Catherine. I'm really glad you enjoyed the session. Claire, I'm really glad you enjoyed it. Anyone who is still here, in a couple of weeks, I think it might be the 4th of June or 7th of June, I need to check. I will be doing a similar session to this for Pearson. who are big in the education space, do sign up to that webinar. I'll put a link into the follow-up as well. If you follow me on socials, I will be promoting it there. You won't just hear my monotone voice for an hour or so. You will hear from other speakers as well. So do check out their research. I've had the privilege of looking at the report recently. It really is insightful. I'll say they're big in the inclusion space, and if you want to major or dig deeper to any of the things we covered today, that report does deep dive into that. So that's a great one. Do try and join that session again, and we can perhaps focus. I think that one might focus a little more on alternate reality and virtual reality, and also on neurodivergence. But that's not to say we are 100% focused on neurodivergence in that one. Just having a look on who we have left in chat. I appreciate many of these may be AI note takers and stuff. In a couple of moments, I will turn off the recording for today's session because I like to foster that sense of psychological safety. Some of you prefer to not be recorded when you ask questions, and that's totally fine as well. But otherwise, once again, thank you for joining. Thank you for watching if you're watching on repeat. And I do hope to see you again further down the line. So thank you from me. Goodbye and take care. With that, here we are stopping the recording. And I am